Welcome to the Brain Software Podcast, the only podcast you need if you're into hypnosis, NLP, and personal development. I'm Chris Thompson. Today, Mike Mandel and I are back in the Hypnotic World Epicenter, Toronto, Canada, with lots of cool information for you. So stay tuned for another awesome Top 10 list. This time, we're talking about personal transformation.
Hey, Scro, what's happening, man? Life is so effing weird these days. I'm up here in the 42nd dimension with Albert Einstein just hanging out. I heard a rumor that the Shizjig Corporation's built a secret colony on Mars, man. That's right, Pouch. It's awesome. It's like a frickin' cosmic bubble of plastic with agricultural terraces right inside Donia, dude. They even got a Starbucks. Keep it quiet for now. I'll let you know developments as they emerge from the Atabacron. Kilpazixum.
Thanks, Dr. Ambrose. It's always a joy to get this kind of inside information. Information that raises questions.
I'm not a number. I'm a free man.
But seriously, folks, whatever happened to that old tranquility we used to know? These are days of victory! So welcome to the village, our fearless leader. A man who's spending an extended period of time in the Great White North. A man who cannot help but not deny that he hasn't eaten too much wheat lately.
Ouch.
The world's foremost senior citizen,
Man of such power.
Mike Mandel.
Yes, Chris, the most extended arrival ever. That was fantastic.
That was an extended arrival, buddy. Welcome back. It is like nearly the end of summer here. It just feels like summer has switched off like a light switch. It's cold.
It's freezing
rainy.
in my cabin. It's freezing in our cabin. It's just terrible.
You're spending another 6 weeks up in the hills of Minden, Ontario.
I am.
Driving down to the Hypno East.
Yes.
And all right, so we're going to have a great podcast today.
What's coming up?
Before we begin, let's give you a quick announcement, a few things. So we're pretty excited that coming up in less than 5 weeks now, Michael C. Anthony, the world's greatest stage hypnotist, is coming to Toronto, October 19th and 20th. And it's starting to fill up, buddy. So if you're interested in coming out for an incredible stage hypnosis training, and not just for those interested in stage hypnosis, but anybody who is a therapist, a people helper, who wants to build more fascination, more demonstration, more capability into what they're doing,
more confidence
learn more
in their
about
hypnotic skills,
body language, everything, mentalism skills. It's going to be a really fun weekend, and it's at MikeMandelHypnosis.com/MCA, which is simply short for Michael C. Anthony. So there's your URL.
And the day before.
So because we're setting up this class on October 19th and 20th, I reached out to find out if the room that we use at the University of Toronto campus had availability on Friday, October 18th. It did. So we've booked it, we paid for it, and we're holding a mindscaping training.
Now, this is a certification training. It's a one-day mindscaping intensive. If you've never studied it, if you're a personal coach, a sports coach, a counselor, a guidance counselor, if you're a hypnotist, a therapist, mindscaping is a tool you will love. It will fill those gaps in what you're presenting to your clients. It will give you a means of dealing directly with the unconscious mind of the person in front of you in ways that are absolutely transformational.
You can find out more about mindscaping at MikeMandelHypnosis.com/mindscaping. And one cool thing that we do is, if you have purchased the digital mindscaping from us in the past, then make sure you reach out, because we will credit you what you paid in order to come to the live training, so you get a discount. And if you do come to the live training and you've never purchased mindscaping, then you get that included. The digital copy is included. So that's what I wanted to say about Toronto. We're going to quickly also mention that we are heading to London in November, and we're there for Wizard School, which is advanced hypnotherapy techniques. Then we're there for the 3 days of the conference, followed by another mindscaping session right after the conference. And all of that, I'm not going to speak more about it. You can find out about it on our events calendar, which is at MikeMandelHypnosis.com/events. All right.
So let me just say, Chris, just really quickly, a great thing is you can come out and do mindscaping on the Friday, stay all weekend, and study with Michael C. Anthony as well. So it's a 3-day.
In October.
Yeah, in October.
Yeah,
just fantastic.
Backing up to the Toronto schedule. That's right. Yeah, come on out. We'd love to meet you and hang out. It's a great time. Okay, we're going to move on to podcast content. So, Mike, we had an interesting email that came in, didn't we? Now, remember, we're backing up. We're going to back up real quick. So in episode 132, we titled it something. I can't remember what the exact title was, but it was something to the effect of Top 10 Greatest Hypnotists of All Time.
And this was purely a subjective list. This was my list of people that I honor as the top 10.
And it was a really, in my opinion, it was a fun discussion that brought in a lot of interesting history about hypnosis. How did we get where we are?
Well,
who are the various people?
Yeah, showing the markers. In fact, Dr. John C. Hughes wrote a phenomenal book on the history of hypnosis, from Mesmer to Erickson. I highly recommend it. It's really fascinating. About 400 pages of this. And he really hit the top hypnotists in each era. Now, I didn't necessarily agree with him about some of them, but our list was not intended to be a definitive list in order. This is number 1, this is number 2, because if it had, naturally, I would have put myself on the list. Just kidding.
Oh, I would have edited that out.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah.
So
no,
it went over weird though.
So we got an email, and this really does have a point. It's not just us ranting. We got an email from a woman named Linda. We're only going to use her first name
to avoid the lawsuits
in the UK. And so she wrote to us and said, "This was so disappointing. Anyone can read a list like that from a book." It wasn't from a book. "And it is a very good illustration of the lack of comprehensive knowledge and understanding of hypnosis by these two people." She was writing to us, the ones who actually recorded the podcast. "But then I really didn't expect any more."
Okay, well, let's deconstruct this whole thing. This is very interesting. So disappointing. Now, as Richard Mandel said, disappointment takes work.
Yeah.
You have to have a plan in advance of how you want things to turn out in order to be disappointed. It doesn't just happen. Mm-hmm. So she obviously expected something from this top 10 list beyond being a top 10 list.
Which we can't possibly guess.
Right. And typically, we just put stuff out there. We don't pull every single human being and try to make it work.
Yeah.
So then she said, anyone can read a list like that from a book. Right. Except we didn't. This isn't from a book.
It's not from a book.
We made it clear. This is just a discussion point, and it got into the history.
And we got a ton of positive feedback on that episode.
know.
People loved it. It was a great discussion. Not that we're going to continue to talk about it for
Here's the
too
humor
long.
to me. It is a very good, quote unquote, a very good illustration of the lack of comprehensive knowledge and understanding of hypnosis by these two people. Now, we are these two people. She obviously didn't know she was writing to us. But here's, Chris, I've been accused of a lot of things.
But a lack of knowledge of hypnosis?
I've been called arrogant.
Egotistical.
Yeah. But I've never, old.
Yeah.
But I've never, ever been accused until now of not having a comprehensive knowledge of hypnosis.
I wonder if she is aware that you were the keynote speaker at Hypnothoughts Live. And anyway.
I guess she doesn't know that we have hypnotists and even psychiatrists from around the world come to Toronto and train with us.
So Linda,
Linda,
we're very sorry that you didn't enjoy the episode.
Oh, wait, I'm not finished deconstructing.
Okay.
She says, but then I really didn't expect any more. Well, that flies in the face of the first thing you said. This was so disappointing. In other words, you did expect more. But then you didn't expect more. Well, the weird
I was
thing
disappointed, but I didn't expect anything.
Right. So it's contradictory. It self-stultifies. Now, if you look up stultify, Linda, it will help you with your vocabulary when you understand this. When we look at this whole point, when we put this out there, if someone doesn't like a podcast, I listen to different podcasts.
Just hit stop.
Stop. Or listen to another one.
You don't email the people and tell them how horrible it was.
Listen to the whole thing and then email. I said to you, Chris, it's like passing a sign on the highway, drink Coca-Cola. And I'm so freaked out by this that I go home and write to the CEO of Coca-Cola and say, why are you advertising Coca-Cola to me? I drink 7-Up.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm a Pepsi man. Don't advertise Coke to me or whatever it is. Yeah.
My reply was,
I love this reply.
I just said, Linda, I cannot thank you enough for this hilarious email. I didn't know anyone was still taking LSD.
Okay. So there's our fun for the episode.
Feel free to respond, Linda.
The bottom line is, folks, if you don't like something, don't waste your life emailing the people whose stuff you don't like.
Or actually, I hope they continue to, because I just thrive on this stuff. So
some people will be offended. Like, it's not a nice thing to do. It doesn't make you a nice person to do that, right?
Ken,
All right, let's go on. So,
think tank words of the day.
All right, we've got
now.
3.
Let's explain how we have them. I did not take the think tank up to the cabin in the Great White North.
Instead, actual think tank.
Right, with my new iPad Pro with data and 20
gigs
a month.
Data.
It's great.
In Canada, that's a lot, people.
I punched in Random word generator. And if you Google it, there's actually a random noun generator. You can say how many you want. So I picked 3.
Which is totally cool.
So it's just like having the think tank.
Okay,
here.
so it's an electronic think tank this time around. And the 3 words are...
requirement, reflection, and mud.
Wow. Well, you can't get a reflection from mud, so there's the first thing.
Okay, so let's go with this, Chris. What do you get from requirement?
Requirement, I've been thinking a lot about time management. In fact, I want to credit right here, right now, Jason Linett. I just listened last night to a really good podcast that he did on time management skills for hypnotists.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it was a really great 30-ish minute, action-packed, really clear, full of metaphor, excellent podcast.
Jason does excellent stuff.
Anyway, so yeah, listen to that if you're interested in the business of hypnosis. I think he did a great job with it. And it was about understanding your own requirement. What is it that you are requiring of yourself? And then only do those things, right? So if there's something that you really shouldn't require yourself to do, you should fire yourself from a task. So from a time management perspective, focus on what it is that you really need to get done and do those things. Reflection can feed into that. Reflect back at the end of the day. Am I doing a good job of doing the tasks that are important to me in my life right now?
Right, because you've got to have a way of calibrating whether it's working or not.
And
now,
then mud, I'll just wrap up real quick. Okay, go ahead.
We have to unpack requirement more because I find that very interesting. I think Pareto's principle probably applies here like it does in most things.
Oh, good point, yeah.
People will typically, if they're inefficient, put 80% of their... I just noticed Chris is using his iPad Pro as a freaking coffee cup holder, which is just chilling to me.
It's not the actual iPad Pro. It's just the case.
Yeah.
All right. Next any happier, I'll move it.
Move it onto your iMac. Yeah. Move it onto your... never mind. The bottom line is, I think people probably, when I was largely inefficient, I was putting 80% of my time probably into the 20% of things that didn't matter.
That don't matter. That's right. Yeah. So what are the things that do matter? And then reflect back at the end of the day, end of the week, end of the quarter, whatever it is that your planning period is, and ask yourself, have I done a good job? How can I do better? Now, if you don't know the answer, maybe that's your mud. You got to clarify things.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right? So there's where I get.
You can't see a reflection in a muddy pool. Reflection right away makes me think of Aesop's fables, where Narcissus stared at his reflection in the water and fell in love with himself. Narcissism. People will read a text and they practice, instead of exegesis, which is the unpacking of the text, they practice narcigesis and try to see themselves in the text.
Oh, man.
So our reflection should be limited to what is actually there. We shouldn't see everything in terms of ourselves. Self-reference, too much of it is bad.
It just reminds me of...
self-reference coming up.
It reminds me of reading somehow that when people look at pictures, if they're in the picture, their eyes immediately go to themselves.
I've never seen a picture that wasn't about me.
There you go. Okay.
Oh, no. Okay.
All right. So now there's our little discussion of think tank words.
Let's talk about transformational techniques.
We were going to make a list of top 10 NLP techniques, but we realized we don't want it to be limited to, not that NLP is limiting in some way, but by including anything that could come from outside of NLP. We now have a list of 10 transformational techniques that you can use as a therapist with others or on yourself. So there are less limitations than calling it purely NLP techniques.
And again, Chris, that one of the hardest things here has been limiting this just to 10. It's not in any particular order that this is number 1, because some idiot's going to write to me and say, "Oh, it should be number 4."
Buddy, not only was it difficult to keep it to 10, but it's going to be difficult to actually go through all 10 of these in any meaningful depth. So consider this a surface exploration, folks, for those listening.
Yes, and I just want to say up front, Linda, you will be disappointed with this list.
Oh, yeah, you'll be very disappointed.
Let's start with the one I've got first here. Is submodality shifts. Now, do you want to unpack what submodality are?
I think for those who aren't familiar with the term submodality, we first have to explain what modality is. So modality would be the modes of sensory information. So you've got visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and kinesthetic, of course, has feelings, right? Which is also
touch.
Categorizations of kinesthetic include olfactory and gustatory, which are smell and taste.
Right.
So within, let's specifically think about visual. So in the visual modality, we now have things like, if you imagine a situation visually, you imagine a scene. Are you in it? Associated? i.e. like looking through your own eyes, which is associated, or are you seeing yourself in the picture, i.e. the camera is sort of separate and you see yourself in this scene, and that's called dissociated. Or sometimes people say disassociated, which I don't like, but they're both correct. Then you've got the idea of, for example, let's say you're thinking about a dream. Did you dream in black and white, or did you dream in color? Or if you imagine something from your past, do you imagine it in color? Do you imagine it in black and white? These are sub-modalities. So they are, to break down the visual component, it's the elements that would describe, is it 3D? Is it 2D? Is it a moving image, or is it a still image? Is it something that has a border? Does it not have a border? Is it bright, or is it faded? Is it in focus? Is it not in focus? Is it distant, or is it near?
Did you say 3D and flat?
3D and flat, yeah.
And again, we can also add the auditory submodalities to this. Is there sound? Where's the sound coming from? What's the direction? Is it
loud or
soft?
quiet?
Is it buzzing? Is it clear? Is it distorted?
Reverb or no reverb?
Yeah. Is there music? Is there a soundtrack? And what feeling is associated? Where do you get that feeling? It's very interesting because Richard Bandler said, I'm pretty sure it was him, he said submodalities are the building blocks of human experience. So meaning everything that we code in our brains, in our memories, because immediately as soon as we code it, it's now in the past. Everything that we code is done through submodalities. And the understanding that we have a way of coding experience when it happened, maybe in space around us like timeline works with, or people you like and people you don't like. How do you code them differently? And I discovered in my initial NLP training in 1992, 1993 with Chris Dunkley, that people I did not like, I coded them without legs. I saw them from the waist up.
Isn't that interesting?
Technically from the
toilet
area.
Purely unconscious.
But, yes, purely unconscious. And one of my friends signed a thing to me, a card, and he said, may I always have legs? May I always be your friend? Well,
so he knew.
Yeah. Whereas my friends, I see full body in my imagination. Now, this is interesting because people think, oh, you're just playing, games with your own mind. Well, no, actually, you are recoding information. When you change a submodality, which happens in a swish pattern.
Totally.
Anytime we change the submodality, since our brains are making new connections at the rate of about 1 million per second on average, we're changing human experience. We change the way we code things. We change the way we react to things as well.
So people can play around with submodalities simply by imagining some, let's say you pick a memory that bothers you in some way. Ask yourself, when I imagine that visually, what do I see? What can I change about it? And how does that change how I feel? What do I hear? How can I change the auditory components so that it feels better, less negative, for example?
Right.
We can flatline the negative emotions of a past experience.
For sure. And you take a negative emotion, you want to typically shrink it down, make it black and white instead of color.
Push it
further
away, make it out of focus maybe.
Yeah, and it will start to lose its emotional charge very quickly. Likewise, get all the great stuff that happened in your life. That time you got standing ovation, your best sex experience, whatever it is, and make that full color close. And bring it in, make it 3D and vibrant, and your brain will store it that way, and your memories that are good will be more accessible. So submodalities work right across the board, which leads us to number 2, which largely uses submodalities, which is timelines.
All right.
And, Richard Bandler wrote about timelines. The Andreases did, Connie Ray Andreas and Steve Andreas, the parents of our good friend Mark Andreas, who's an excellent trainer. And I think it was Tad James who probably did the most work in codifying this so that it became an entire system, timeline therapy, which is trademarked. And I highly, highly recommend Tad's training in this and in other things. But timeline adds the component that human beings apparently code events geographically in space. In other words, events that are in the past, we often put them behind us. Events that are close in the future, we put directly in front of us. And Chris is holding up Timeline Therapy and the Basis of Personality by Tad James and Wyatt Woodsmell, which is a great book.
I picked this book up at a local used bookstore for something like $7.
Well, maybe you should tell everyone where the bookstore is, Chris, and they can all go there. Comic genius. So anyway, Timelines adds the component of distance and where it's coded around you. An interesting thing happened. I dealt with a guy doing therapy back in the 90s. This guy lived, this is about 1994. This guy lived in Oshawa, which is east of Toronto, and he worked for the Ford Motor Company there. I think it was Ford or GM had a branch in Oshawa.
Yeah, GM.
GM. And this guy had pseudo heart attacks. He was about 26 years old, married, great wife, and he always thought he was having heart attacks. And he'd have panic attacks, and he'd feel chest pains. They'd freak out, call 911. He was being taken away in an ambulance. He's yelling to his wife, "Goodbye forever," like thinking he's dying. Gets to the hospital. His vital signs are completely normal. And this kept happening. So I said to him, "Where is that picture?" He said, "I keep seeing myself having a heart attack, seeing myself have one." I said, "Where is that picture?" He said, "It's right here." Holds his hand up right in front of my face. Okay. So I said, "You ever see one of those little trains that people had around their Christmas trees? Go on a little track?" He said, "Yeah, we had one of those when I was a kid." "Excellent. Why don't you put one of those trains around your head at about eye level and put that image of you on that train and swing it around behind you so you can't see it." That was the entire therapy. It took 5 minutes.
Yeah.
The guy never had a pseudo heart attack again. Now that's working by moving it in space like a timeline to where he cannot see it, even though it isn't a real thing.
So that's pretty cool. There's timelines.
What about anchoring?
All right.
Give us some anchoring info, Chris.
Anchoring. Okay. So anchoring, it sort of, I don't want to say that it comes from the field of classical conditioning. It's sort of a faster way of approaching the same trigger.
Because B.F. Skinner's classical conditioning required repetition.
Yeah, and this is a faster way of achieving it. Basically, what we're talking about here is the idea of eliciting a peak state in somebody. So let's say it's a feeling of tremendous happiness. And right when somebody is feeling that absolute peak state of happiness, we can have them, or as a therapist, do something to connect it neurally in their brain.
Okay, but again, this does not have to be a positive state.
It can be negative.
Anchors are a switch. They're an on and off switch that become attached to a specific state, feeling, emotion, whatever. And it can be a negative one. You know, I had one fire a few weeks ago. My wife and I went to the Canadian National Exhibition, which is one of the biggest exhibitions in the world. We went last year, had an absolute blast. This year it was kind of flat, but not to take a shot at the X. But yeah, as you know, Chris, I did hypnosis shows there for about 6 years, and it was extremely exhausting, extremely high pressure. And I would be out in the hot sun, and I would do one a day for something like 18 or 19 days. And it just, my head was buzzing. I couldn't shut it down. And I was working with a thing called a stress eraser just to get my stress down. Well, that's years ago. I haven't done the X in 6-7 years.
But you remember that.
I remember it.
Stressful time. Yeah.
I remember the standing ovation too. But as Heather and I were driving to the CNE, the X, on the way there on Lakeshore, I turned at the same place at Fort York like I always do. I said to Heather, "This is really weird. I feel anxiety rising
there
right
you
now.
go.
I don't even have to do a show, and I'm feeling this anxiety with the pressure of the show." That was an anchor.
So basically, the memory of that stress was connected to that particular location, or something you saw, something you drove past.
I think it was the location
and
the feeling of approaching the CNE. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so
anchors can be removed, though, by overwhelming them with positive anchors. And as we teach in our class in Toronto, one of the things we do in the first few minutes of day one is we get everyone to set up an awesome anchor by touching their thumb to the ring fingertip of their non-dominant hand, pressing it, saying awesome, staring at it while they're in a peak state. And then they keep using this through life. Every time you notice you're in a great state at a concert, having a fun evening with your friends, notice it. Fire the anchor, say awesome, and you start stacking these powerful states on top of each other and overwhelming the crap.
It is very interesting. And so we challenge you. Think about what anchors are already in your life. Where are you just unconsciously starting to feel anxious or perhaps really, really happy?
Now.
Start noticing them. Take the bad stuff, collapse those anchors by overwhelming them with good ones.
Awesome.
All right, number 4. That sounded weird. Number 4, the meta model.
The meta model.
This is my favorite for when people say, "Oh, NLP is a bunch of garbage. It doesn't really work." You just start asking meta model questions to them.
What specifically do you mean by that? Yeah. It's insane. Meta model is the structure of magic, which was what Mandel and Grinder wrote in the 70s. John Grinder being a consummate linguist, one of my teachers, my best teacher ever. The meta model uses language to clarify language. Because
what do you mean by that?
What specifically? Yeah. Language has a deep structure. The deep structure is all the depth of everything that you are tying to those words, all the hidden meaning. And we just have the surface structure, which is the most basic representation of it. And the meta model clarifies and gets access to the deep structure, and it helps people change, sometimes just by asking the right questions. How specifically, what specifically, lost performatives, how did he do that, missing referential indices, Modal operators of possibility and necessity. All of these are linguistic terms, but the meta model will show you how to use language to clarify language. And it's a great one because it stops us from mind reading, from thinking what the person means. So if the person says, I'm feeling kind of sad lately with all these pictures in my head. Now, if you're an idiot, you jump in and say, it sounds to me like you're depressed. Well, depressed is a nominalization. It may not be right at all.
And it means different things to different people.
Different things. But if you say, what pictures specifically? Now you start to unpack it using the meta model, and it will clarify it for the person and will enable them to make powerful change. And if you're a therapist, you need the meta model. And of course, the metaphor model as well, which is clean language. I'll just mention a side thing here.
Absolutely.
What about the as if frame? I had to put this in because I think it's just so ridiculously powerful.
Yeah, the as if frame is wonderful. And it's basically to behave as if you already have something that you want, or to act as if you already are something that you want to be. And it sort of connects in with the idea, how we talk about in hypnotic language, or in hypnosis, not in hypnotic language, anything that assumes trance causes trance, the interconnection of the result to the cause, and they feed back on each other. It's the same thing here. By taking on the frame as if I am already a fit person, I can ask myself, okay, well, how would I behave if I was a fit person? Oh, I'd be waking up early and going to the gym. I'd be eating these super healthy foods.
Moving with a string in my step.
So now I start behaving that way, and guess what? I get fit.
And it's not, we don't say fake it till you make it.
You're not going to do it with brain surgery.
Say, fake it till you become it. Until it becomes who you
put on the freaking costume until you are the character.
Oh, I love that. That's
Maybe
nice.
That's another way to think of it.
I think I'd be the Joker.
Yeah.
But this is really cool because the as if frame can help us take on the physiology of someone who's a success, a winner, whatever, by just taking on every aspect of who we want to be and acting as though it's already happening. You can change all kinds of things. Like people say, I want to be a better presenter. Okay, how would you behave if you already were a better presenter? Well, you'd be more congruent, you'd be more confident, you'd make more eye contact with people, you'd make sure you know your material inside out. There's all kinds of things you can do, and then you can act it out and make it happen.
Absolutely. Okay, next, you want to go to number 6 on the list.
Yeah,
tapping.
I just called it tapping because there's so many things in so-called energetic psychology now. Energy psychology, as Dr. Fred Gallo calls it, classical psychologist. We got Be Set Free Fast from Dr. Larry Nims, that was one of the first certified in the world in that. And a lot of these different things. We've got thought field therapy, Roger Callahan. We've got tapas acupressure technique, Tapas Fleming. We have EFT, Gary Craig, taking the information from TFT and systematizing it. Then we've got faster EFT, which is Robert Smith's method. But we also have our 6-step tapping, where we're just tapping the top of the head, which is the anxiety point in Chinese medicine, the center of the forehead, which is the bladder meridian, outer corner of the eye, under the eye, collarbone, and then squeezing the wrist. Those 6, if you tune into a problem state, will often erase it very, very quickly.
Okay, so in the show notes, I'll make sure that we link to the application. We shot a video on this to apply it to fibromyalgia. I believe was probably one of the most recent videos we did involving tapping. And that way, if you're listening to this podcast and you want to follow along, go to our website. Make sure you find in the blog area, you'll find the post where we put this episode 133 in the show notes. We'll link to the YouTube video. Alternately, you can just find our YouTube channel, Mike Mandel Hypnosis, and search on fibromyalgia. I believe that'll lead you to the video that we're talking about. The idea here being that you have to, forgive the metaphor, tap into the state that you're looking to address, right? So you need to ask yourself first, let's say, you're concerned, you have anxiety about, let's say a job interview tomorrow. So you're going to tap into that. Where do you feel that anxiety? How bad is it on a scale of 1 to 10? Oh, it's a 7. Okay, can I push it up to an 8 by really thinking about it and making it worse, right? That puts the ego state that's driving that anxiety in the executive. Then we apply the tapping.
Which is terrific, Chris. Really well put. So I think we should jump right to number 10 and then come back, because number 10 is parts therapy, which is
perfect. Let's do it.
Therapy. The idea that we are sub-personalities. They are digital. They cannot be executive at the same time. And the best work on this goes back to Paul Frere and Watkins, and of course, Gordon Emerson. And I think it's really, really important that we recognize that we are a classroom of different parts, or a house full of different parts. The key is to put the right one. Executive therapists who do not understand ego state therapy and ego state theory are shortchanging themselves and their clients, because the power of getting the right state executive for the job and eliminating negative states, in particular evaded ego states that are invaded by fear, anger, sadness, trauma, by making them executive, tapping it away, whatever, the power is absolutely enormous. And now, Chris, we actually have to do a commercial.
Let's do it.
A word from our sponsor, the Shizjig Corporation.
Hey Groovers, ever wonder why there's just too much reality out there these days? Most of us wake up in our sad, tired lives only to go to our sad, tired jobs, only to come home to nothing more exciting than splitting cornflakes with a razor blade. If that sounds like you, and it does, we at the Shizjig Corporation offer you a fascinating retirement option. Life on Mars. That's right. For a down payment as little as $15 million, you can be one of the first settlers in Cydonia, where the soil is red and the atmosphere is a pristine mixture of carbon dioxide, molecular hydrogen, and argon. Start a brand new life in the Jack Ruby gated community, just steps from Starbucks and a short lunar rover jaunt to the nearest 7-Eleven. You'll thrill to hitting 500-yard reduced gravity drives on the soon-to-be-built Elon Musk golf course. We will take you there, and we will train you too. Thrill to a brand new career as a greeter at the first interplanetary Walmart, or a highly paid information retrieval officer at the beautiful Shizjig Cydonia Bay Penitentiary. Days of victory indeed. So sign up and enlist today. The Martian Occupation Army wants you.
Paid for by the Shizjig Political Solutions Committee and the World Economic Board for Social Incredulity at Large and the Cydonia Association of Wrongfully Convicted and Executed Frotaging Martian Birthday Clowns Union, Local November 1963. You know, Chris, I had to put mindscaping on the list because it is a phenomenal modality. You know, we just got another email yesterday. Actually, I got it through Facebook Messenger. A guy in Seattle said, another successful mindscaping session. Thanks so much for developing this. And the guy's a full-time therapist. It is a remarkable tool. I know I came up with it, or at least discovered it, but it is amazing insofar as you can point it at anything. And that's where the power lies. Two things. The fact you can go as small as, I like to say, you know, that appointment tomorrow morning, or my dentist appointment tomorrow, or the meeting I have, or it can be something as huge as my health. And it will work either way. And we're getting amazing results purely because the person's own unconscious mind provides the metaphor that unlocks the problem, which is astounding.
It is a cool idea. So the concept here is that you're going to help someone architect this inner landscape that represents, it's the metaphor for their problem.
Right. And when we change the metaphor, their life changes as well, sometimes in bizarre, almost miraculous ways.
If you're interested, check it out, MikeMandelHypnosis.com/mindscaping. And also, secret little tip, if you're a member of the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy, we include Lesson 26. It's a primer on mindscaping, and that's included in the Academy, MikeMandelHypnosis.com/ actually, the URL might change because it's confusing to read, but it's /join-MMHA. But you can find it on our website. It's easy to find.
Talk about rapport, buddy.
Okay, rapport. That is something near and dear to my heart. It's very important for me as a 9 on the Enneagram model to get along with people. And rapport is the glue in hypnosis that holds trance together. Rapport is like a magnet that can allow you to pull somebody else's emotional state towards where you want to guide it. Rapport is critical in so many areas. If you are trying to influence somebody and you do not have rapport,
you're banging your head on the wall.
It's like similar poles of a magnet that oppose each other, right? They push apart.
But what about people who'd argue that rapport isn't a transformational skill?
I think it is. I think it is like...
Well, they're wrong.
Yeah, I'm trying to come up with a good metaphor here and failing, but rapport is just so important. If you want somebody to be affected by you in any way, then whether you're in rapport or out of rapport, and you might want both at different times, depending on the situation, is going to have a dramatic effect on the result.
You know, I would intentionally break rapport at the end of a session with a client to set them free to go home. And I chose the method that busy executives use. They have a meeting in their own office, and they're running the meeting. And when the meeting's over, they just break rapport. All they do is stand up. Just stand up. That's it. Everybody gets up.
And it's not a rude thing. That's the idea. When you are breaking that rapport, you're not doing it in a rude way. Well, okay, time for you to leave now. You're not going to say that, right?
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of ways to do this. So build rapport by being nice to people, caring what they think.
Remember, the Grinder secret of imagining that they are the most important and fascinating person you've ever met and continuing to pretend that. It does wonders. I actually did it again yesterday to get me through a particularly difficult time when I was voxing you, begging you to vox me so I could get out of there.
Yeah, you were stuck somewhere you didn't want to be, and you were looking for...
Let's talk about the rewind technique,
okay.
which is our final one.
All right.
Now, the rewind technique used to be called the fast phobia cure.
That's right.
And you can run it on phobias and negative emotions. And basically, you're having the person double dissociate, seeing themselves on a screen, then imagining they're floating back to seeing themselves in an audience watching the screen with the event there. And you have them run the event backwards and forwards. But the way you're doing it, every time you run it backwards and forwards, you can scramble it just by doing it back and forth. In fact, Freddie Jacquin does an amazing version of this. But the idea is you run it forward, first of all, very dim, very gray, very shrunken, and watch yourself watching it to the end, shrunk down image, and then jump into it full 3D and run everything backwards. Full color in about 2 seconds. And just pretend you do. And what happens is you're rewiring your brain with this stuff. You're stripping all the negative emotions out.
You're screwing up your brain's ability to access that state.
Which is good.
It's I was going to say very difficult. It's impossible to feel an emotion backwards. Right?
Yes, it is. And when the emotions run backwards, it disappears. So you're stripping the kinesthetic right out of the visual memory.
Okay, so to make sure people have a bit of an idea of how this works, let's talk through a quick example of somebody that is afraid of bees because they got stung by a bee at some point.
Okay.
Not anaphylaxia type thing, just I got stung by a bee, now bees are scary to me.
Right. So they imagine before they were stung on a screen in front of them, small and grainy and black and white, they dissociate out of themselves now. So they're watching themselves watch this screen.
They're imagining that they're watching themselves watch
it's good to run it with a coach. You can do it yourself. They run it forward, black and white and grainy, to the end until they are safe again. Then they float into themselves in the audience. Then imagine they go up into the screen after the event, enter it, full 3D, full color. Now run the event of being stung backwards really fast in about 2 seconds. So the sound, the direction, the color, everything's going backwards. And then when they're before the event, they check it again. And generally, once or twice through, will completely strip all the negative emotions.
So your starting point and your ending point are all safety points. So you start, you're safe. Then you go through this process where you imagine, okay, you've been stung. It's painful. It's annoying. And then you're safe again because you haven't died or had an anaphylactic reaction. Right. It's like, oh, that hurt. That really sucked. Okay. And then you're going to go jump into the experience. Imagine that you're in it full 3D color and go through it backwards. All the way back to before you got stung by that bee, and you do that a couple of times, and you scramble your brain's ability to re-access that emotion.
Actually change the coding in your brain, which leads us to the empowering questions for today.
All
Chris,
right.
I'm going to say over to you.
So here's your empowering question for episode 133. What are the areas of my life that require the most attention in order that I will receive the greatest benefit now? What area of my life will I dedicate time to improving in order to be my very best?
Excellent. So I have the Meta 5 today, and it's an odd one, Chris. I've saved this one. This is the flight to Miami in 2007. It was October the 2nd. And October the 2nd, Heather and I call it my paranormal day because I've had so many bizarre things happen on October the 2nd in different years. I almost expect something to happen. But I don't think I'm affecting reality. The bottom line is, I was flying to Miami Beach to do a keynote presentation, a 1-hour keynote for Deloitte. Speaker Spotlight had sent me down. I flew out of Pearson Airport on a rainy, thundery day on an Embraer aircraft. And I was sitting in the aisle seat, as I usually do, but the aircraft was half empty. We took off. It took a while to get airborne above the clouds. And then, when you get above the clouds, it's like white cotton below you and the brilliant blue sky when you're above the storm. People had their blinds pulled down. People were reading or watching different videos and stuff. And I had my window open, screen open. I was looking outside the flap and just over the wing. And after maybe an hour in flight, I don't know what vector we were flying, but I noticed on the cotton looking, the white whipped cream looking clouds that were a perfect shelf, in the distance, there was an object. I'm not making this up. I posted this online years ago, anonymously. There was a depression in the cloud, and sitting in the depression was an enormous silver disc. And I'm looking at it, and we're far away, so it's taking a while to pass it. And I didn't even think to tell anyone. I just sort of sat there in this weird calm. And then I noticed there was another thing came up on the brink of this. It looked like it was scooped out with an ice cream scoop. Another spherical object near the enormous disc. And it turned, and I could see it was shaped like an egg. Then as this was moving past me to the left, into the distance, I could see a third craft come out on the other side that was still looked round because I was seeing it head on. And then it drifted past where I could see it. Just then the seatbelt sign went off because we'd had some turbulence. And I rushed to the washroom. I'd been waiting to hit the washroom for some time. I came back and looked out the window again. Of course, that was long gone. And I saw, if we were at 30,000 feet, another thing, maybe twice as high as we were, a dot. And it dropped down. And this thing paced the aircraft in the distance. And then it rocked up. And from underneath, it looked like an inverted V with rounded wingtips. And then took off back in the direction of the other ones. And when I landed in Miami, I went to my hotel balcony and just stood out there for a long time looking at the sky. And I posted it online because of the freakiest thing. Well, I've seen some freaky ones. As you know, I've filmed UFOs on 2 occasions, but that was the freakiest encounter I ever had.
Whoa. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been Brain Software, episode 133, with Mike Mandel, and I'm Chris Thompson. And we hope that you enjoyed it. We look forward to your wonderful emails, including Linda. And we'll catch you again in episode 134. Make sure you go to MikeMandelHypnosis.com/events to check out what we're doing around the world, mostly in Toronto, and our homepage where you can download the Brain Software ebook, which is just at MikeMandelHypnosis.com. Thanks, and good night!
Chris, have you ever dreamed the impossible dream? I mean, you've accomplished a lot. Have you ever dreamed it?
I don't know what you mean, Mike.
I dedicate this to you, Chris.
To dream the impossible dream, 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 to dream the impossible dream. Robert Goulet.
Oh,
to dream the impossible dream, to dream.
Oh,